that you have, right? It's the most valuable asset that you have. You can be a billionaire or you can have a dollar in the bank account and everybody has the same amount of time, so to speak. That's the way I used to teach it. But now I'm teaching Einstein versus Newton time, and I'll explain what that is in a little bit. If you haven't got the 90-day sprint, you'll get that at the end of this call. Everybody's kind of in a different spot. But that will kind of break down what your 5 like kind of onboarding personal calls with me are going to be as we kick off into these 90 days. And so, but controlling your calendar is a very, very important thing. And as I pull up my sheet here of my notes, and I'll make sure that you guys get this sheet, and then also the perfect calendar, which you'll get access to as well. But where does time come from? Let me hear from you guys. Like, when you hear time, what do you guys think?
I think that I don't have enough of it.
Mm.
I feel like, I mean, but I've been taking a lot of classes. I've been having to take care of some back end stuff. So it's been keeping me really busy and trying to keep up with the business at the same time. And I wrote an offer. I got this listing going on. I got to coordinate certain things for the listing for the seller because he's out of town. And honestly, I don't, I, my head is spinning a little bit. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You sound like the typical real estate agent who's busy. Uh, I see Kent laughing. What you got?
Oh, that's the reality of it, you know. But honestly, I'm more like, I think a focus for me. If I can manage it right, I have focus time, which is where I hopefully, which I'm not great at. So don't take this that I'm good at it, but to hopefully prevent that very situation, which typically doesn't work because I just do it all in my head.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and I felt and I have felt the same way, Sylvia, in a lot of times in my life, maybe even daily. So I don't have this completely perfect, but some of these tools that I'm going to give you guys today, I feel like are going to definitely help you. And my goal for everybody on this call today and everybody watching this recording is basically the title of this is how do you produce double the results in the same amount of time, right? Because that's the key, right? And so where does time come from? So we have Einstein time versus Newton time. And so Einstein time, so Newton time is basically kind of what you said. Like everybody has the same amount of time. Everybody's got the same 24 hours. That's kind of what Newton time is, right? I believe in Einstein time. And Einstein actually believed that, time is infinite, right? And we have as much time as we want. To make you have the power and the ability to make as much time as you want. And then Newton time is kind of limited. You got 24 hours and that's it. And so one of the number one things that you guys need to stop saying is I don't have enough time, right? Because that's one of the number one things that I hear from real estate agents is I don't have enough time. I didn't have enough time to get to that. And the reality, and I'm not saying like, oh, you just need to stop making excuses and you need to be like super stricter with your calendar, but it's just about the ability to realize like, man, I own my time. And there's a reason why, there's real estate agents who are super successful and others that aren't, and they have the same tools and they have the same abilities and they're running the race at the same pace, but one may be a lot more effective with their time and able to produce like double the amount of results, right? Not just because they've been in the business or they're super charismatic or whatever it is. It's because they can be effective with their time that they do spend in the business. And with everybody, and especially with real estate, like being able to protect your time as you walk into that door to be with your family, right? Or to be with your kids or to be present is a super hard thing, especially when you got such a high demand on clients saying, hey, I need you to write this offer. Hey, I need you to do this. Hey, I need you to do this. And it's like, how do you offer that excellent service and at the same time still protect your time and be able to still get a ton of stuff done? So we're going to go into some tools on how to do that. So, but understand that first thing is you need to stop saying that you don't have enough time because you do, right? And then here's some affirmations that go along with that. I'm a huge into affirmations like faith comes through hearing, and in order to hear something, you have to speak it. And so speaking out truths about your identity, goals, and dreams are all really important. But saying like, I am where time comes from. Like you are like, I am where time comes from. You control your time. I have abundance of time, right? I create the reality of time. I create my time, right? All of those things, saying like Kyle creates the reality of time. Kyle creates my time. Kyle has the ability, has an abundance of time. Kyle is where time comes from. Time comes from. You can say your name, or you can say I, all of those things, right? So here's a few things to keep in mind, right? So pace determines progress. If you feel like you are close, would you max out effort, right? So there's a good question for you. You know, you look at big sales teams, and everybody's, you know, got that push towards the end of the year, and everybody has that you know, that desire to you know, hit their goals on the last like week or quarter or all those things. A great book that what is that book called? I'm gonna have to look it up now. I'm creating a book list for you guys too. But there's a book, and the concept is basically like there's a lot of people who they hit their quota, and then all of a sudden they're done. Where's that book? I might have deleted it. I'll send it to you guys later. It's a great book. Yeah, it's such a good book. I can't remember the name, right? Okay, but the concept, one of the biggest concepts of the book is like, you know, they hit their quota, you know, hey, I hit 3 sales this week. Hey, I got my sale for the day. Hey, I got my sale for the month. So they don't push anymore. And it's kind of like, you know, if you had Steph Curry, the basketball player, and he was stinking hot and he was at 30 points at halftime, would you pull him, right? The answer is no, right? You would let him continue to stay hot. And that's the whole idea, is that when you're hot, you should press in, not pull back. And so the question that I had asked originally is, if you feel like you're close, would you put out max effort, right? If you felt like you were close to getting that sale per month, or that 3 sales a month, or a sale a week, or whatever it is for you, or getting a listing a week, whatever it is for you that your target, or that you're kind of hyper focused on, would you put in that max effort? And so one of the examples that I like to give is that I went to this mastermind, and one of the things they had us do is we ran around on the beach, and we had 3 stations, and at each station we had a workout, right? And our group would like the leaders basically watched us for about 20 minutes, and it was a group of like 20 dudes, and we would do our workout and then go to the next station. And it was just like this constant like triangle run, right? And it was all in the sand, right? So we do like what they call the sand cookie, where you do like a forward facing reverse, like, you know, like the snow angel. It's the opposite. You're laying on your face doing an angel in the sand, and then you get up and do a burpee, right? So that was one of the exercises. And then you keep going to the next one, next one, next one. And so the leaders, they left. Like they were yelling at us, telling us to, you know, keep going. And then all of a sudden they just got in their cars and left for like 30, 40 minutes. We're like, what? But everybody kept going. We kept figuring out, hey, are we doing something wrong? Are there cameras? Like what is it that like how do we know when we're gonna stop? How long are we gonna do this for? So we did it probably for like over 2 hours, like constantly doing this thing. And there was a lot of analogies that went into that. But one of the things, you know, at the very end, they brought us together and they said, all right, you know, a lot of you guys have been going hard this whole time. Some of you guys haven't, you know, but the reality is that everybody's kept going. And they said, hey, we're going to do one last triangle, and your goal is to go all out as hard as you can, right? And so everybody does, and they go all out as hard as they can. And they did it in such a way, like the max effort, because they knew that there was a finish line, right? And so there's something about knowing like your targets for each week and pushing to those targets each week, each month, each quarter, and each year, right? So there's a sense of urgency when you're focused, and that's why we kind of break things up into quarters and 90-day sprints, right? Because what if you do it right, you can accomplish more in 90 days than most people could accomplish in an entire year. So that's, and kind of think of like each week is a lap, right? You're running a lap for each week. And in this week, my focus is X, Y, and Z, right? So winners control their time. So, you know, certain things that like, hey, I have to get this project done, or I have to get this newsletter done, or I have to get this YouTube done, or I have to get, this listing presentation dialed in, or I have whatever it is, and saying like, hey, I'm not looking at my phone for the next 60 minutes, right? And I like to work in increments of 20 minutes at a time. So 20, 25 minutes, and then take a 5-minute break. And that 5-minute break, there's a few things that I do to kind of reset. One of those things is I take, like 10, 20 breaths, fully in, fully out. And then I do some push-ups. I'll say some affirmations. And it just gets my brain. And then before I step back in front of my computer, I'll remind myself like why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? One of those things is like, hey, before I get in front of my computer and start making these calls, I'm doing this for my wife, Megan, or hey, I'm doing this for my kids, or hey, and your why has to be bigger than you, because when it is, it's going to be like kind of that wind in your sail that pulls you through the hard times. And if your why is not big enough, then you're not going to push through those harder times. So, but working in increments of 20 minutes. And so when you look at your phone and you got a clock going and you're like, shoot, I can't quit. I can't get distracted. I can't let that email pop up, one of the big things is about turning off your notifications. Like you shouldn't have notifications coming on your social media notifications, your email notifications. All those things should be blocked in your calendar for when you should be doing them. You shouldn't be like, and yes, even your clients, when they call, saying, hey, I'll give you a call back, right? And let them know when. And that way, when you call them back, it's like you're being very strategic with your time, because if you don't control your time, somebody else will. And so it's really, really important for that. So having a routine is super important. That's why we have our Create a Millionaire mindset. And you guys should have that in the 90-day sprint. But turning your days into mini days, right? These mini days, the way that I'll share my screen here, but the mini days that I break it up into is 4 to 8 a.m., 8 to 12, 12 to 4, and those are 3 mini days, right? So my days, I have 3 days when people live one, right? And don't get me wrong, it's not always work, but this is how I work my days, right? 4 to 8, this is where I'm working on big idea projects. This is where I'm working on systems and processes. Like one of the systems and processes we got done this week was we got our newsletter automated. I went in and I recorded how we do our newsletter for both our agent attraction and for our production. And this is to keep our database warm. This is how to keep our leads adding value to my database every single week. And so I recorded that, and my inside sales assistant just messaged me probably about an hour ago. And I hadn't responded yet because I've been working on something else, but I come in, let me see.
So Kyle, did you say you work for 20, 25 minutes and then you take a 5-minute break?
Yeah. So I work for 20 minutes and then take a 5-minute break, or work for 25, then take a 5-minute break, right? Because your mind can't comprehend, like you got to refocus yourself and then come back in strong, right? When you just try to grind out through a project, or have you ever gone to do something and then all of a sudden you try to go do something and you open up like 4 tabs and you kind of get lost, your brain's foggy, like it's just like you kind of hit a wall. Like the way to avoid that is to work in those 20, 25-minute increments, right? So yeah, let me see. So Brett said, okay, so I'm like 90% sure he got all these trigger words done for our leads. Oh, and then he said both new newsletters for next week are already are ready for checkout and approval, right? So it's like, great. That took 2 hours off my to-do list, right? And those 2 hours can be used for productivity things, right? So now I'm saving 2 hours a week, if not more, because of that system and process setup, right? So 4 to 8, I'm usually working on systems and processes and how to optimize my business. What things can I take off of my plate? What things can I record, right? I'll never shoot this video again, or I'll never do this class again with somebody. They will see it in a recording, and then we'll have a follow-up call, right? So it's going to save me 45 minutes. It's going to save me an hour. So that's one thing. And then 8 to 12 is usually high what I call ICP or IPA, kind of like the beer, increasing profit activity, or HLA, high leverage activity. So that's usually like where I'm doing my prospecting or creating content, right? Those are the two places where that happens. And I'll share my calendar with you so you guys can see it. But I'm trying not to put in like appointments with clients. All my appointments with clients and people and strategy calls and all those things usually happen in the afternoon, right? Because I can get, because what you, especially as a newer agent or a high producing agent, you got to make sure that you're hitting your IPA every single day, increasing profit activity, whether that's, you know, picking up the phone and calling your leads, getting your value proposition nailed in. You can also have time for, you can have windows of time for like educational stuff, getting better at your craft. Those are good things to have in there. But you got to have at least 2 hours a day dedicated to your increasing profit activity. Because if you don't, then your business is going to end up running on empty, right? And we don't want to do that. We got to keep the pipeline. Even if you have leads coming into your system, you still have to follow up with them. You still have to have those times, unless you have an inside sales assistant, unless you have a team that's doing it, then you're doing a little bit more management. But even then, like you're still, if you're trying to recruit high talent, then you're still like making calls. Like sometimes because I'm in that in between, right? I'm still producing and I'm still recruiting agents. So I'll be in the mornings, I'm on the phone recruiting agents, making calls, right? Or I'm making calls to for a listing appointment, right? Or to expired or a FISBO or a warm lead that came in on my home value, right? And then the afternoons are when I set my appointments. So, and by that, and don't get me wrong, not every hour of this am I working, right? The morning part, I probably work about an hour and a half. The rest of it is like on self-improvement stuff, right? Like I'm doing my morning routine. I'm working on my 4 pillars: faith, family, fitness, finances, right? I'm working out, or I'm on the way to work out and I'm listening to an educational thing. I'm doing my cold plunge, I'm getting sunlight in my eyes, I'm doing all the stuff that allows me to operate at a high level, right? And that's that morning section, right? And then in that, when I come home, I usually have about 30-40 minutes to an hour where I'm dedicated to like my family, where I don't bring my phone to the house. I'll leave it in the garage, and I'm like super hyper focused on being present when I'm in that door, right? And then I go back in, and then I go out and I work on my increasing profit activities, right? Call my leads. So living intentionally through your calendar, this is going to be a really important thing to learn how to do. So when you control your calendar, you control your life. If you don't control your calendar, you're not going to control your life very well. So let me see here. So this is what my calendar looks like today, right? Starting super early, 3:45 to 4:30. I'm seeking God, praying. Power hour, redoing some slides for an event. Iron sharpens iron. So this is the call that I did with some guys that we do a call every Thursday. And then I had a rut call, which is actually every other week, so I didn't get to do any content creation. This is where I connected with the girls really quick. Had my team huddle with Brett. You taught my YouTube masterclass, right? And then we worked on some. I worked on my brother. I have like a marketing and branding company that we're working with a few businesses that aren't real estate related. And so, anyways, worked on that a little bit. This I moved. This is on demand, so I was making calls during this time. Here's this call. Me and Sylvia have a call after this, and then I'm headed to make this for a listing appointment. Emails, right? Bed, review finances in the evening, right? So that's what this looks like. Tomorrow is a little different because we're going pretty far out to list a big ranch. So that is in there. So what Tuesday look like, right? But you also want to, let me go back to this. And everybody's calendar is going to look different based on where they're at, right? So here's the big thing that I had to learn, right? Don't overbook, leave some gaps, right? So having white space in your calendar is actually a good thing. A lot of people want to just have it so booked that they don't have any transition period, which is not a good thing. So one of the things that I've started to do to help with that is I've actually set my calendar. I've set reminders in my phone, my alarms, right? So I have an alarm throughout the entire day that goes off that says different things. So I have one starting when I first wake up, it'll change. I'll wake up anywhere from 3:45 to 4:30. That's kind of the range depending on how much sleep I get. But the first thing that when my alarm goes off, it says live today like it's your last day on earth. And then the next thing is like I'm waking up early and then putting my why, which is for Megan. And then the project that I was working on last night and this morning was social post for Attract ROI, which means like putting all of our content through one platform to go post on, which you can do through Attract ROI. And then at 7:30, at the end of my calls and stuff like that, I had a question of what am I looking forward to today? And then the rest of the day had like reminders to serve, to give, and to live for adventure. At 10 a.m. it says bring the joy bomb, right? So whenever I have alarms going off, like the next one I have at 3:30 and it's saying serve, give, and adventure, right? And so it's the three words, like three core values that I want to live my life around. And it's reminders for me to be like, oh, okay, no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm on this call or in a meeting, your alarm goes off. You're like, oh, okay. And it reminds you to be intentional, right? How am I showing up for each appointment? How am I showing up for each meeting? What does that look like, right? And so it's like, okay, I'm going to serve whoever is in front of me. I'm going to give all I have, give 100% out, and I'm going to make sure I'm having fun. And if I'm not, then I need to ask myself, like, hey, why is this not fun? And is it because I'd rather be doing something else? Is it something that needs to be done and I need to figure out how to delegate it, get it off my plate? What does that look like, right? So I try not to schedule any meetings before 10, right? All of the other except for I guess the mastermind calls. I guess there's a few of those early throughout the week. The rest of everything else is like self-development, family, increasing profit activity, right? That's what before 10 a.m. looks like, or before 11, however you want to put it. And then time block. So time block your most important task, which I talked about in the morning, having systems and automation. And then the use for personal and business is in the morning. I review my calendar every morning so I know like, hey, what is coming down the pipeline? What am I looking forward to today? Don't have any don't have too many requiring appointments, right? So like don't overbook yourself with like 3 listings in one day, right? Be like, hey, strategic, okay? Because your clients will respect, right, your time. And when you respect your time, they respect it. I've even had to tell clients like, hey, my phone goes off at a certain time at night, and it just does. If I got a deadline or something like that, obviously there's that. But don't skip calendar appointments. If something's in the calendar, it's like it gets done. If it's not, it doesn't, right? And so that's why I schedule like my time with God. That's why I schedule date nights, right? If those are not in the calendar, it does not happen. So it's super important to put your calendar is like your roadmap. And you will either, Jim Rome says you'll either get to a well-designed destination or an undesigned destination. And the way that you get to a designed destination is basically a calendar, being effective, knowing your next moves, right? And having like your, when I talk about setting your SMART goals, which is in the 90-day sprint, you want to make sure that you have your what do they call them? Your weekly targets, right? And not overwhelming yourself with like 100 weekly targets or even 10. It's like, hey, my number 1 weekly target for this week was to get my newsletter reported and done. And so I never have to do it again. And that happened on Tuesday, right? So I'm like, man. And you also, something you have to remind yourself when you're a high achiever, you have to enjoy the process. You have to be satisfied with where you're at in the pursuit of where you're going, right? There's so many times where I feel like people feel defeated, like, oh, I didn't get enough done. Oh man, there's so much more. Man, they start to beat themselves up, but you have to learn how to enjoy just where you're at. Like, and so when you go to bed, I like to journal before I go to bed. It doesn't happen every night, I'm not perfect. But pulling out my journal and just asking questions, right? What did I enjoy today? What went well today, right? And all of those things, and kind of putting a into the day, to the chapter of the day, and just being like, and looking back and being like, man, that was good. There's a reason, you know, that, God created the world in 7 days, right? Or 6 days, and then on the seventh he rested, right? He turned back on his week and was like, man, that was really good. I did a good job, right? And that's the same thing, right? On Sundays, I like to, in the evening, and take a little bit more time, be like, man, what went really well this week? What reflecting on what went well, what didn't go well, what could I improve on? But more like, hey, what went really well? And then also, what am I excited about this next week? What am I looking forward to? And so there's something about that, and being satisfied with where you're at, because I think there's a lot of pressure in this world or in this industry. Like, man, I want to be a top performer. I want to, I want to make 200 grand this year. I want to make 500,000 this year. I want to make $1,000,000. I want to go to the moon, right? There's all of that. And then you start to look on social media, and whether it's real or not, you feel all this pressure, right? And so being satisfied with where you're at in the pursuit of where you're going is going to be a really key factor, because it's going to keep you from burnout. Like, there's a reason why the industry, it's a hard industry already, but there's a reason why there's like an 85% turnover rate in the industry, right? And it's because people get burnt out. And there's a reason why people, it's also the 90-10 rule, or the 80-20 rule. Like, 10% are the top producers and the rest are kind of like on the bottom. But here's what I'm going to say to you. Like, you can be a 10% producer and also be happy, right? And also like feel like, man, I'm crushing this. I'm not just crushing it in my business, but I'm crushing it with my family. I'm crushing it in my faith, fitness, my finances, every single one of those, right? Because here's the thing, like, when you show up 100% for your family, like, it's going to help you perform really well in your business, right? When you got arguments going on at home and your kids don't know who you are, and you're not present, then that's going to linger into your business, right? Whether you want it to or not. And then same thing with your fitness, right? If your fitness isn't, you're not performing at the highest level, and you're not like taking care of yourself, then it's also going to start to trickle into other areas of your life. So it's really important to keep every single one of those buckets full, and not just full, but overflowing into every aspect of your life. So, because when it starts to overflow, then you start to have impact in other people. And that's the goal, right? It's not just for you, right? It's to have the impact in your families, in your business, in the world, all of that, right? And then if I skip an appointment, I haven't all the way done this. This is something I'm working towards. So when I skip an appointment, having an accountability. So there's a few people that are like my accountability partners in business, and so I need to start texting them when I either cancel an appointment or miss an appointment, because I can't control my calendar, right? And then collaborating with your spouse is huge, right? So if they know what your calendar looks like, they're not going to be calling you saying, hey, can you do this, when they know that, hey, you're in a meeting, right? Or, hey, when you're working from home, that can be a hard thing. But if they look at your calendar, be like, man, he's on a strategy call, and he's got this, and he's got this, he looks like he has a window around here. Maybe I could have him, do what I want him to do during this time, right? And so it's just this really important thing to be able to collaborate with the people who are most important to you, and not just being like, you want to have that two-way street, that communication, because what I used to do is be like, hey, I'm king, and king of the castle, right? And it didn't always go well. You got to make sure that the other person understands, or it's almost like, I mean, me and Kent were talking about this on our call earlier this week. It's like you go through the day, and you're like slaying appointments, and you're getting listings, and you're getting calls, and you're setting your appointments, and you're getting lists, recruiting agents, all this stuff. And then all of a sudden you walk through the door, and your wife's like, hey, can you do the dishes? Can you do this? Can you do that? And you're like, what? I've just been killing it. Like, now all of a sudden you're asking me to do this? But it's because you got to change your mindset when you walk through that door. And before you ever walk through that door, you have to transition well and be like, okay, let go, take a few good deep breaths, let go, and then ask yourself, hey, how do I want to show up for for my spouse? How do I want to show up for my kids? And asking those questions and then answering them like, hey, I want to show up at 110% for my wife. I'm going to look for ways that I can serve her as soon as I walk through the door. I'm going to look for ways that I can, connect with my kids. I'm going to leave my phone in the garage. I'm going to leave my phone in the car, like until, kids go to bed or whatever it is. And then you walk through and you can show up 100% intentional, focused, right? So all of those things are going to be really, really important. So here's the example of the calendar for real estate agents, right? Every industry, every business is different. But this is just a framework for it. It's not perfect. So you have momentum building, morning ritual routine, 5 to 7:45, whatever that looks like for you. You have prospecting for clients or agents, recruiting. I suggest it being one. Like, hey, maybe on Mondays, I'm Monday through Wednesday, I am working on production. And then Thursday, Friday, I'm working on agent attraction, right? And it's not like you don't do both on both days. It just depends on where you're at in the business, right? Flex time, so open for transaction files if you're still managing your transactions. The number one thing that you can get off your plate is getting a transaction coordinator after you've done a few deals. I know everybody's a little bit different, but being able to have that transaction coordinator or that assistant, licensed assistant, is huge. I was just sharing this with Landry the other day. Like, I literally called Julie after an appointment and be like, hey, Julie, here's your criteria, write the offer, right? Boom. Done. Offer's done. Offer's sent. Here's the criteria. I'll look it over. Boom. Like, I didn't have to spend 30, 40 minutes writing an offer and checking it. Like, I just gave her the criteria and it was done. So that's the place that you want to get to, especially when you have a ton of business and it's almost like you're the quarterback and you're telling, like, all right, you're giving the audibles at the line and get to the line. You're like, all right, that person, you run a post. Hey, over here, you're going to run a slant. Hey, linebacker, look for that blitz. Running back, you're going to pick up that blitz, right? And so it's like you're calling the shots, and then you press hike, and then it's just easy, right? You already called everything out, and it's just going to flow. But if you get to the line and you have no idea, and you don't know your calendar, and you don't have the right team working for you, you're going to feel really overwhelmed, right? And so the things that you got to figure out where your time is best spent and then focus your time there and delegate the rest, right? So the more you can delegate, the better. It's hard to let go of control, especially when no one's ever going to do it as good as you. But one of the things that I've heard is, well, first off, you got to create a culture of honor, create a culture of where people, when they come into your business, they feel excited to work with you. And that's a whole other chapter. But one of the other things is, maybe no one will ever do it as good as you, but if you hire two people that do it at 70% as good as you, now all of a sudden you got 140%, right? So figuring out, like, hey, what can I get off of my plate? What is a list of things that I'm doing right now that I can delegate to somebody else? And when you're first getting started in the business, you're not going to have the same type of demands. You just need to get good at your craft, and you just need to make those phone calls, and you just need to work on what is that one thing I'm doing to get listings, right? And focus on that, right? But as you evolve, you got to get things off your plate. You got to get the transactions off your plate. You got to pass it off. EXP has transaction coordinators that you can hire. You can hire a local one. Finding a licensed transaction coordinator is going to be really big, and turning that person into an assistant, a licensed assistant, is going to take a ton of stuff off your plate, because then you're not writing contracts, you're not doing counters, you're not doing any of that stuff, right? You're just negotiating, and then you're telling the people what to do, right? Having white space in there, client transaction follow-up, flex time, and then this is where you hold for appointments. You can see in here they have only 2 slots where they do voicemail, text, and messages, right? Voicemail, text, and messages. There's only 2 spots for each of those. And then content creation. So I'm going to give you guys this, but what your guys' homework is to make your own, and everybody's different, right? Some of you guys are moms, some of you guys maybe are part-time or whatever it is, so it's not going to look the same. But put in there, like, hey, I work my other job from this time to this time, or I'm with the kids from this time to this time. I have date night on this time to this time. I'm fly fishing from this time to this time. I'm playing golf from this time to this time. Everything is strategic, right? And if it's not in your calendar, it doesn't happen. Put the things in there that are important to you. If God is important to you, put the time that you're spending with God. If your kids or your spouse or your friends are important to you, put those things in there, right? Um, so I'm gonna send you guys this. You guys will get the recording. I'll send you my notes so you guys have them. And any questions?
So the different colors you have in your calendar, they're each separate calendars, or is that like a Gmail calendar you use?
The Gmail calendar, I just color code it for the things that are important. Right?
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if like there was like different
Yeah,
calendars and
you make the colors whatever you want, right? Like for me,
Mhm.
you know, I have my leads and stuff green, like money, right? This is high activity, you know, where I'm making calls
Yeah.
or I'm meeting with a client, right?
hmm
Project thinking research, right? The red, that's something I don't, you know, don't want to miss. Marketing, everything marketing is purple. You know, all this can look different. I have these coaching calls, I put them in orange, because it stands out to me and I want it to be important. Um, so yeah, that my calendar looks different now, but this is how my
hmm
calendar is. But here, I'll share mine. The framework's really similar. All right. Power Hour, Seeking God, Mastermind Call, Call Leads and Production, White Space. This is our call. This is Tuesday's calendar. Here is you know, here was our coaching call on Tuesday. I had an accountability call with a guy I'm coaching, like a one-on-one coaching. Here's Kent's call, emails, day night. Look, I
So
sprinkled my prayer and affirmations in there.
yeah, how I've been like scheduling myself is I've been like including like travel time and free time like as an actual scheduled task, but it's like I think I got that like thought from like financial budgeting where it's like every dollar goes is allocated somewhere. You know, I was kind of like piggybacking off of that for my schedule and saying like, okay, like every minute should be dedicated to something, whether it's like quality time with the kids or time with the husband. But I, when my calendar looks like that, it could be like kind of overwhelming. So I guess, do you suggest me just like not counting like travel time and free time and just letting it show visually as like a gap in my schedule?
You could. For me, like I have to do a few things. Like for today, like if I didn't put Leaf for Mankus at this time, it probably would have got booked, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And so it just depends on where you're at. You know, I put, you know, I think that I'm trying to see if there is an actual like white space. There's not. Like there's just gray. Like then I wonder if you can add a white label. Because I think it'd be cool to actually put white space into your calendar. Um,
Yeah. Because
having
then
it
it's like, I can
so
imagine in your mind, it like
yeah,
makes you
but I think
feel.
it's just more of I get what you're saying. It can feel overwhelming, but knowing like, hey, this is a time of rest, right? Or even having the
hmm
go off, right? And that can
hmm
more. It's like, hey, I know that I'm going to be resting in this time.
hmm Okay, cool.
Hey, Kyle, do you have any suggestions for a good transaction coordinator or assistant? Because I had some people working with me last year, and the girl that I had doing the paperwork, even after a year, I don't know if something, maybe I was doing something wrong, or I wasn't explaining things properly, or maybe I wasn't taking enough time with her. But after a year, I still had to double check every contract, every PA, every addendum, every listing contract because she would miss things. So it was a little bit hard. So
Yeah,
I mean, I understand that delegating is the great thing to do, and that's what I want to do. But I mean, I found quite a few mistakes even after we've been working together for quite a few months. So that was not good because that's my license, our license on the line. So
yeah. I get what you're saying, Sylvia. A few things. So I always try to take responsibility in everything, right? There's not full responsibility, so I'd ask yourself like, hey, why didn't she know stuff? What could I have done better? What are some areas that I could have taught on? Could I have recorded our calls? Could I have made sure that she was going to training? Could I have, what could I have done better to help her perform better? Like that's where I would start. And then sometimes people just aren't a good fit and they're not good and you got to let them go and you got to fire them because, what I've learned is when you don't, when you're not, when you have like, so this is way that it explains there's A, B, and C players, right? And you're on your team. And unfortunately, in the game of life and business, you got to fire the C players because they could be a B or A player somewhere else, right? And so if you can't make that B player an A player, then like that's the goal. It's like, hey, I'm taking my B players and I'm making them A players. Like you can't. There's a saying like you can't send your ducks to Eagle school, right? Like and this is the same thing with agents, even recruiting. Like there's some agents that are Eagles and they're just learning how to. They're B players learning how to fly, and then there's agents who I've worked with who are unfortunate in C players. And I'm not saying like I'm gonna cut them. I'm gonna try to do their very best, but they're not gonna get a lot of my time if that makes sense, right? And it's the same thing in your business. Like if you find people who are hungry, humble, and smart, and they're willing to learn, and they're showing up, and they're working hard, and they're a B player, you can help them become A players. If they're a C player, then most likely they're not going to be able to become. Maybe they could become a B player, but they're probably going to be they're probably just in the wrong role. And you got to look in your business and be like, hey, is this person a better fit in a different role, and move them to a different role, or let them go and let them go be a B or A player in something else. And you're actually doing them a favor because they can show up better and at 100% in a different way in life, right? So there's that. And then to answer your question shortly, EXP has transaction coordinators that you can hire. So go into Workplace, go, ask Mark, your broker, and be like, hey, for New Mexico, and be like, hey, who's a good transaction coordinator that you would recommend? And just see who he recommends, and you can interview them. I suggest you interview them. And I don't have a template for that, but I can work on getting you one. I haven't had to, yeah. Anyways, I would interview them so their standards and expectations set right away. So you're not like, I thought you were gonna do that. Hey, I thought this is, and they're like, oh no, I don't do that, right? Or hey, I don't know that. But if you have standards and
Or I
expectations,
already did it and it's wrong.
yeah, yeah. So that's another thing too, is that when you hire somebody, there should be a process that you're hiring them in, not just like, oh, okay, you're a transaction coordinator, you work, right? Same thing when you're hiring like a VA, right? Or inside sales assistant, there should always be a hiring process. And we can go over that stuff. That's a completely different talk, but great question.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? Any other questions? Cool. So I'm gonna throw.
No, that was good, man. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. I'm gonna throw in the chat a few things. So first, I'm giving you guys the 90-day sprint. If you don't have that, this is gonna be like your first kind of like 5 calls that you'll get. We'll do like a one-on-one call after you complete the task. And my whole goal is for everybody who's coming on to into the team that your first 90 days that we're able to have a lot of success right away. So let me grab this and throw it in there. So the first thing on there is going to be the SMART goals. So you're going to listen to that talk and you're going to set your SMART goals. And then you'll schedule time with me and we'll go over your SMART goals. Because here's the thing, we want to make sure, and once you do that, you'll be put into the Slack channel and you'll get like an accountability partner. And you guys will keep each other accountable in the process of you reaching your goals, right? And this isn't a way to like, when you're keeping someone accountable, it's not so much like, oh, you suck. You didn't do what you said you were going to do. It's more like, hey, how can I help you? How can we help each other be better, right? So there's the SMART goals. We have the Realtor Create a Millionaire Mindset, which is just some of the stuff that you can do to create momentum into each day. The perfect calendar, which we just went over. So your homework for for that is to actually do your own calendar, screenshot it to me, and I'll give you feedback. Clarity questions. These are the 30 questions that I talked about last 2 weeks on the call. Some people I'm having them redo because, you know, they're not super clear on where they want to go. And if you're not clear, then how can I be clear and how I can help you? And then you have your 1-page plan. Here, I should share my screen. And then you have your 1-page plan, and this is basically going to be like all of your numbers, and we're going to add some stuff into there, have some stuff that we're tracking, because what you track increases. So I'll share what mine looks like. We'll put that in there. And then AI playbook. So this is just a bunch of AI tools that I've collaborated and put into one spot for you guys. Dominant listing agent. Most of you guys on this call has that, and then the cash cow. So those are all things that you guys can have, get access to. But the first thing is, you know, the first 2 calls are like super important, right? Setting your SMART goals, getting into the, getting into the right accountability pod, and then your calendar. Like those 2 things, if we can do at least those 2 things, then everything else we do will fall into place. And so yeah, let's just focus on those 2. And then after those 2, we can move into the other stuff. But for most everybody on this call, you got to get your SMART goals and your calendar to me. And then I can give you guys feedback. So that's that. And we can do a call around it. But usually the way that I like to do it is first, you fill it out, send it to me. I'll give you feedback. You refill it out, and then we have a call. Because what happens is if you just fill it out and we do a call and I give you feedback at the same time, the call is it's just not effective. There's too many changes. There's too many things, all of that stuff. So, Judy, who do we got there?
This is Miss Maddie.
Maddie. Hi, Maddie.
You say hi?
Love it. Cool. Sweet. So you guys have that. You guys have the calendar now. I'll send you guys this recording. So your guys' homework is fill out your calendar, send it to me, and then do your SMART goals and send it to me. And then we'll get some appointments set up in the next week or 2 to get feedback on those. I'll give you feedback for the weeks or before those 2 weeks, but we'll have calls in between that time. And then everybody should be getting access to the NAEA stuff on this call, the National Association of Expert Advisors. That's your seller and buyer presentation. And yeah, those are the main things, but don't overwhelm you. There's a lot. So, but it is important. If you can have your calendar done and your goals done, then we can know how fast to run and where to run. So. Cool. Questions?
None here, man. Thank you.
Awesome, guys.
No questions, just excited.
Sweet. Let's
Thank
rock.
you.
All right. Hey, Sylvia, let's jump on here. I'm going to end this call and then we'll jump on here real quick. All right.
Thanks, Kyle.
You guys have a blessed
Thanks,
day.
Kyle.
Bye, everybody.